And
Yeah.
Ghost Lineage means a lot about that. It's a lot of that uncertainty. It's the continuum of uncertainty from Static Files. It's actually there was a song in Static Files called Reasons, and I found out like I couldn't. I found out because I was going with some girl and that I could only have kids through IVF and shit like that. And this chick was like, I ain't trying to go through that shit with you. You crazy. You be alright. You gotta deal with that shit on your own. You know, not everybody's gonna go through that road. Like that's just, and that's some New York shit. I was used to somebody being like that because I'm like, shit, bitch, you ain't doing nothing no different that I ain't never been around all my life. Like that's whatever. We built for shit like that. But that song, a song Reasons, talks about that topic and it talks about contemplating legacy. What if you can't have children? How would you have them? Everything is based for human beings to procreate. Imagine if you can't, how would you switch that around? So then your legacy will have to be determined and defined in something else aside from that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's when
Yes.
you reach a whole different level of humanity and shit like that. And so Ghost Lineage also sprung on from that track from Static Files, and it gave birth to that whole idea. And then the pandemic happened and it just made things a little bit more cloudy. Not only is legacy up to fucking to be determined, now our whole lives are to be determined. Now the whole world is to be determined because we don't know where the fuck we headed towards. So it deals with all of these topics that have people thinking like, damn, yo, I gotta like I gotta look at things in a whole different way. You know what I mean? I was already in contemplation and retrospect, and then when this shit came in, it just magnified that and multiplied my
Heightened
curiosity
it.
and inquiries
Yeah.
like 3 million times fold. So we started dabbling in a lot of these topics. I told Don Tique before the pandemic hit, like, yo, we should start recording songs now a lot. And he would be like, you know, we just did an album. I was like, yeah, but fuck all that. You never know what the fuck will happen. You know what I'm saying? We're getting old.
Facts.
And I'm glad that we already had like a good 8 joints already in the clip because when the pandemic came in, we were like, all right, this ain't nothing. We was ready for this. We were supposed to have an album release for Static Files on March 22nd, but Jersey City put a mandatory lockdown because of the rise in cases and deaths and shit, and that stopped us from actually celebrating the release of that album. But instead of being discouraged, we generated some money from digital sales, specifically on through Bandcamp, and we utilized those that revenue to finance this album, Ghost Lineage. So every money we got, we just put back into the product. You know what you're supposed to do. We don't make no money. We got regular jobs. Everything we doing is purely out of just the fact that we like doing music. So that shit was interesting. But Ghost Lineage is really a deep ass album and shit like that. I'm really proud.
I liked
I'm really
it.
proud of Don Tique for curating that shit.
I,
He put that whole shit together. It's crazy.
I thought it was really good. I was listening to it and I'm like, yo, this is stand out in a style that could arguably be saturated, which is really cool. Like it makes you want to listen to it again. It's got like the bars and the precision, but then you're right. There's like almost like a flow and ebb to the project where it almost feels like you're listening to a TV show play out. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the main objective was to it has a somber mode to it, a somber mood to it because it's more about having people and reflective on what was going on in this period and that there's other things involved in there. You know what I'm saying? Like even from the beginning, Sunez introduces us as we are with the kind of piano like light whimsical style which gives it a not so serious tone, and then Three Kings goes in there, and then Three Kings is basically a introduction of you know um it's like Three Kings Day is the first day, the first holiday one could say, because Three Kings Day is on the 6th of January. You know what I mean? Even though it's
Yeah.
the Puerto Rican Christmas, it's still starting off the whole new year. So it's like a new year. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
explaining to people who we are and what's going on and how we're gonna continue to go on, and You know what I mean? And it also pays homage to the roots of what BMR is, which started from the three: Don Tique, Juan, who's sire, and myself. And that's how that goes into that shit. So that was pretty interesting. And then it goes into like the next song, which is Poppin', and Poppin' is just basically paying homage to our Washington Square Park roots when we would hop the PATH train and we would just rhyme, and you know what I mean. It was more about like having fun, going back to back, and then showing people like we're taking you back to how Don Tique and myself met. And then the next joint is Legends Never Die. We had Shabam Shadiq on that shit. And the reason why I always say legend, I always call everybody a legend. You know what I'm saying? Because I grew up in an alcoholic home. My grandfather would be like, and it wasn't his fault. It's the disease. Like you ain't shit. You know what I mean? You ain't shit. You ain't a nobody. And he didn't know no better because nobody told him that he could be better than what he was. They told him he grew up as an orphan. So when his parents died, he was raised by his sisters, and they probably was telling him he ain't shit. Ain't nobody was telling him like, yo,
Yeah.
you a legend. You could be something better. You could be something greater. And so, you know what I mean? The legends never die shit was also because of the fact that there was so many legends that died during the pandemic period. One that stuck out the most, that impacted me was when Fred the Godson died. Fred the Godson died, but yet somebody like Takashi 6ix9ine could still come out and do what the fuck he does in his what people would deem buffoonery. You know what I'm saying? And I wanted to reflect that on record. Like that's crazy. Like, Jesus had no descendants, right? They say he did. He said, but for the most part, the narrative is that Jesus had no kids, right? That's at least what the general consensus is. But a guy like Genghis Khan, who was a murderer and caused all this carnage, has 30 million descendants out there. Yet Jesus had no descendants and has a billion followers, 2 billion followers. Would you have rather have 30 million descendants or 2 billion followers? You know what I'm saying? And that's kind
Yeah.
of the dynamics that we was trying to
Yo, I
explain
know, I
in that
know.
shit.
He's fucking. This is
And
the way he
Don Tique,
does to me on a regular basis, by the way. And
yo,
that's
that's
why I'm just sitting here quiet, like, yo, just let it rock, fam.
Yeah,
The man is like
nothing to say. Let him do
a
it.
merchant of greatness, yo. And it's just
Don
like,
Don
yo, just let him
that shit That shit was
continue,
crazy,
continue,
man.
please,
But Don
legend.
Teague's verse was about him growing up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and how he had to learn how to be. His gladiator school was sometimes going to Uptown on Harlem Week, and they would rob people and shit like that. And you know what I'm saying? That's where he was
Yeah.
taught his way to be a man, and it gives him insight into that because that was a real thing in New York City. A lot
Yeah,
of people don't
yeah,
talk
nah,
about.
fucking,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah. People don't talk about like at the beginning. Freshman Friday was like real, like it was vicious out here. Freshman Friday was not no like, oh, Freshman Friday we get the haze. Freshmen's nah. It was like, yo, fight for your life. Yo,
Yeah. So
it
like,
was like fight for your life.
and
Like that.
and there's certain
It was
boroughs
a rite of passage,
there was
but it
that
was
real war
bad.
there was that real
Yeah,
warrior
no
shit.
warfare.
Like
Yeah,
Brooklyn
not
was
for real.
really home of the coffin if you from Queens going to Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Or if you from if you going, everybody knew like
the
in
Bronx
my
was
day,
bad.
if you went to the Bronx, nobody wanted, you ain't want no
Nobody.
you ain't want
Yeah,
no problems in the Bronx. You know what I mean? Because the Bronx really be about that life. So
yeah,
like Don Teak was talking about his perspective being in Brownsville, going to Harlem, and how Harlem was considered pretty to them and shit, and how they
yeah.
would
It
rob
was.
motherfuckers there. And then Shabam Shadiq talked about, like, you know what I mean, that how he evolved as an artist and how he came to be and how he was a legend. And I think it was fitting for him to close the song out. And it was dope to have Shabam Shadiq on the song because Shabam Shadiq actually lived in Jersey City and he's from Brooklyn. So him and Don Teak had that same connection, and BMR as a group has the connection between Jersey City and Brooklyn. You know what I mean? And then like Safe is basically dabbling into people feel like they safe because they come into the hood and they live in these gated communities, no different than like the Europeans when they built forts in the midst of native land and shit like that. And so we revisiting those kind of themes and we're talking about it. And I mentioned a lot of shit. I remember in the song I said I was like, Midwestern types move to gentrified places, gated community, make them immune to see the world through the eyes of desensitized natives, claim simplify cause they live inside bases, try to switch up the hood, peep the Gemini faking in a fort made from wood of Dutch enterprise slave ships. But we noble savage with the photographic memory, face of our enemy etched in our mind, withstood the test of time since the days of the Lenape. Should I drink the blood and chase it with Hennessy, or change the red rum to holy water and cleanse my soul with the spirits? Man, it takes too much energy. AR's at the colony, the crime containment unit. Care after the act to probe the mind that made them do it. In the winter, they be hibernating through it. In this open air prison, hearts colder than where polar bears living. And I'm just trying to say, like, it's kind of a legacy that's being revisited again. What occurred back then and what is occurring now, where people are coming back into places with the neo savages or whatever noble savages, and they're building these developments, but they're not incorporating the local populace and shit like that, and they're making it look like we're living outside of these forts, and you think you safe now, but we gonna be able to penetrate inside of those forts. We gonna go in through
Yeah.
that poverty door. We gonna do, you know what I'm saying? So that's one thing we visited. We talking about even though pandemic is going on. Remember, I was saying that buildings were still being built, developments were still being constructed, and gentrification was still ongoing. I would even say more than before because the people that
Yeah.
were dying from the
The prices
pandemic were
went
people.
down. Yeah, prices
Yeah,
went
and,
down
and
in
and
spots
who was
that
dying
like
more from the pandemic? Brown people and shit. So it's
and
whatever. You know
and
what I'm
they and
saying?
they were and they were steadily moving out of New York, so going back like to their home places and keeping the place in the city and then investing in more
You
property
already
in New York
people
City
left
and
the city, they say, but that's only a shaking for shit to come back to where it used to be. You know
yeah,
what's gonna
exactly.
happen. So I already saw that. Then when we had like me is like it's called lineage. It's like, you're not we's too unique. Like me, there'll never be another me. I can't produce another me unless it's in a laboratory. There's never gonna be anyone as unique as me, and that's even now. That's even in a literal sense. So we were trying to explain that away in how one views legacy and taking whatever we had in that song, reasons, the static files, and building upon that in Ghost Lineage and shit like that. So that was like kind of interesting because Don Tique talks about that his grandfather even paid his parents to abort him. Like, yo, I'll give you a new car, I'll give you this, that. Y'all too young because they had him when he was 15, when they were 15 years old. So their grandfather was going to give them money to be like, nah, don't even have a kid. You know what I'm saying? So his struggle even to exist is crazy. And mine was like, yo, my name is Nelson Morales the third. My father was Nelson. His father was Nelson. I'm third. Either three times a charm or three strikes you out. You understand what I mean? And that we building on those themes and that shit. And then we had Q&A, which is a question in reference to like someone's giving, like if we're giving back questions to a panel, and in my panel discussion it was specifically about Puerto Rico and what occurred during Hurricane Maria, where Trump would say, oh yeah, only 16 people died, but it come to the count that 4,000 people died, and a large amount of those people that died were elderly people that didn't have access to dialysis machines because the power grid went out. You know what I'm saying? And the lack of empathy from the disconnect between this country and that island living in this commonwealth colonial status and shit like that. And you know what I mean? It shows. I wanted to bring that into realization, and that's another ghost lineage. That's another. Puerto Rico in itself is living in a political purgatory because it doesn't
Yeah.
know if it's independent. It doesn't know what it is. It's in a confused state and shit like that. So that's another one of those. Then from there it goes to miscommunication, and miscommunication is basically like me and Don Cheek explaining how two different people and two different uh, are talking to other people and they miscommunicating about them. Don Cheek shit was actually about a robbery that was about to go awry because the other guy is out there like almost like dry snitching on them because through the phone conversation, and how nowadays everything is being recorded. No matter what you say, people are seeing it. And that, yeah, it was an interesting take. Mine was just basically about miscommunication, about how people You ever seen that Norman Rockwell painting where Norman Rockwell writes one thing and it's a rumor, and then it ends up being something else 30 different people later? So basically, like a lot of people don't know how to communicate, even in the world where we at, where we wordsmiths and shit like that. And the shit goes on and on. Like Abisu's birthday is about Abisu Campos, who was a Puerto Rican, a black Puerto Rican revolutionary who died for the cause.
Revolutionary. Yeah.
Um, but we
Aviso
always wanted,
Campo is like the hero of Puerto Rico.
yeah, we always wanted to do a robbery song. Abisu Campos was a very interesting person in Puerto Rican history because of the fact that he's a black Puerto Rican who was educated in Harvard, spoke 7 languages. He even assisted in writing the Constitution for the country of Ireland and shit like that. So it was mad bugged out. But in this song, it's about a robbery, and we always wanted to do a robbery song. But instead of being a robbery like the people war and dead presidents, where it was about them, we was out there taking the money and then giving it to the nonprofit organizations in Puerto Rico to help rebuild it from the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, and that's what really that was about. And then my man Renez had a poem that he put in there, which mentioned like how life can go within 60 seconds. Again, life in a minute. In 1 minute, you could be contract a virus or be put on a ventilator and shit like that. Pray for me was basically about like people that are at their last whims and they'd be like, yo, just pray for me, dog. I don't really got nothing else to say. Just I'm at the end, and if you could talk to God on my behalf, that would be much appreciated because I can't even think to come up with the right words to say to the Great Spirit. AK is some shit about like I was acting as if I was a gun, but AK really means how we continue to in this world of with so many targets that we become sharpshooters and shit like that. Cause we living in a world where we saturated with targets, but what are we shooting at? You know what I'm saying? And this shit goes on and on. The black tie, Aguilar's on that shit, which is pay homage to somebody that's a 360, cause I knew Adolf for a while. Black ties and ski masks is basically like just rugged 1990s robbery kind of music, but it's more about that kind of rugged shit. And then Anthony Boone talks about his life, which is a great artist that you saw when we was talking about the video with the painting and shit. Because his father passed away during COVID too, so he wanted to show how he's gonna continue on his legacy, and that we should continue on our legacy as well. Again, it starts to deal with legacy and fatherhood and children and shit like that. And then March is basically the end about what occurred during the the riots, the riot stuff. Don Tique was talking about mainly like rioting, but my shit was interesting because I read a whole book called The Golden House by Salman Rushdie. Salman Rushdie was a famous author that one time got the fatwa because he wrote like the satanic Bible and shit or something like that. And it was like against Islam, and he got that mad death threats for it. But in this particular
Huh?
book, The Golden House is a book where one of the characters he he depicts as the Joker, and the Joker character is really Trump. And so in my song, I'm like, yo, we living in modern day Gotham in this pandemic shit. And they say, remember, you know how in Batman they say if you live long enough, you end up being the villain. You know what I mean? So I'm like,
Yeah.
you choosing the lesser of two evils. So what? You're gonna have to choose Joker, no matter who it is, whether it's Heath Ledger's Joker or whether it's Joaquin Phoenix Joker. Which Joker will you choose? You know what I mean? And then as it goes deeper into the verse, and it explains the Gotham-like world that we live in, and the political situation within this country, where two clowns are actually you have to choose the one of the less, but clowns nonetheless that are evil and don't give a fuck, are disconnected. It also goes into a love story between these two people, that this guy and this girl, and his girl is really active in the political scene and he's not, but he loves her so much that he wants to be out there for her, to the point where he's willing to catch COVID just so he could be quarantined with her. So he goes out there and they go to like a rally, and this girl, being wild about the cause, snatches like a tiki torch from a Proud Boy and then lights up a fucking convenience store. And in the process, like the police start shooting, but the one that gets shot is he gets shot running to defend her and dies for her sake. You know what I mean? And so he didn't really die for the cause. He died more about love. And so what it comes down to is that in the song is like, in all the midst of this madness, in the midst of all this shit, in the midst of people getting caught up in causes, the true thing that still is gonna be powerful and most potent is love. And that's how we ended the record. You know what I mean? So everything in this shit was all connected to each other, and the last legacy of Ghost Lineage is love, and that's it. And that's like the last legacy of anything throughout all humanity and shit. But it was mad poetic on every part of that song and how everything was put together.
Yeah,
It
not
only could
clearly.
be it only could be explained like this, son. I'm glad that you let me explain it, because I rarely could get a chance to explain exactly how deep this whole record is, yo. And it's sad that, what I'm saying, it doesn't get as much promotion as it should. But there's a lot of fucking, it's a body of work where people actually legit did research and shit and put their whole heart into it. That's all facts. Word up. So
Thank
that's
you.
Yo,
crazy.
I
your
appreciate
whole
that.
heart into it. Nah, absolutely. I
Uh,
appreciate the passion for it.